Folks, welcome. You are here with me, Mr. Lee Matthew Jackson, and the one and only Zach Stepek. Zach, mate, how are you today?
I'm doing really well. How are you, Lee?
I am tip-top and champion. We've had an incredible weekend where we've celebrated the crowning of the king. And just before I came to interview you, we were in a street party with lots of food and my little boy getting emotional because they were singing sad music on a stage. He's 2.5. So I've come to just relax with you and talk all things WooCommerce and Shopify, which is pretty cool, with your beautiful, wonderfully relaxing voice.
Well, I appreciate that. I've been told on numerous occasions that I should start a smooth jazz podcast.
Welcome to Smooth Jazz with Lee and Zach. For the folks and out there that don't know you, could you give us a quick little bio, buddy?
Sure. So I am the host of a smooth jazz podcast about WooCommerce. I'm an agency owner that focuses with my agency Mighty Swarm on working with store owners who use WooCommerce to reach new heights that even at times WooCommerce has thought were impossible. And we've had a lot of fun over the years working with really, really large stores. I'm also a co-host of the Do the Woo podcast, so I host something on Do the Woo called the Woo Dev Chats alongside Carl Alexander. And that is a fun time because anytime you put two people with ADHD in a room together, it's a guaranteed recipe for fun. So we have a lot of fun talking with developers who've done really neat stuff. We talk a lot about things we have on our wish list, and we do quite a bit of talking about complex topics, which, last month we did an interview with the lead developer for Universal Yums, which is a brand that sells snack boxes, but they have over 100,000 subscribers. I can't give an exact number, but they renew on the same day.
Oh, man.
And so
I'm getting palpitations.
If you want to know how many renewals they process in an hour, Devin tells us in that podcast. So
Whoa.
It's a good time.
Well, folks, if I remember, which is highly unlikely, there will be a link in the show notes. And also, Do the Woo, you've also got Bob. That's another incredible voice to listen to.
Yeah, Bob doesn't talk on our episodes because he likes sitting in the background and just listening to us. But when we do get him to join, which we have been able to do once or twice, it is fun getting his voice on there as well. And I've participated in other episodes that aren't the Woo Dev Chats where he's been a co-host on those, and it's a lot of fun to work with him. He's just completed his big move to Portugal, which is big change.
He's in my time zone now.
Yes, and he's loving it. So
I also feel like compared to all of you guys, I've got like the voice of a teenage boy. So it's like, but hey. I'm like, hello, welcome to the Trailblazer podcast.
It's okay. I have been gifted for some reason with this deep voice, and I tend to buy microphones that amplify and accentuate that.
That's where I'm going wrong. Well, folks, we are going to be talking about WooCommerce and Shopify, but specifically why people often jump away from WooCommerce and think that the grass is greener on the other side and aim for Shopify. So let's have that conversation. I've got a few questions that I've prepared for you. It's a problem we have managing some of these bigger WooCommerce websites, and we do have clients in the past who've wanted to move. So how do WooCommerce and Shopify differ in terms of kind of the cost and features? And I understand that's quite a big question, but if you could kind of shed a bit of light on that for us.
It is a big question, but the biggest differentiator between Shopify and WooCommerce is that Shopify is a software as a service platform. So you're buying the platform, you're buying the software, and you don't get a choice, when they upgrade that software or how things change or what features are included. And if they choose to raise their prices, well, you're just going to pay a higher price. But the thing they abstract away is you don't have to worry about hosting. They host your site. They own everything about your site. So that becomes interesting if you try to do things like move away. But that's the biggest difference. You can, with Shopify, for a small amount of money per month, you can start a store. They'll take a portion of your sales because that's how they underwrite the fact that you're paying, $30 a month or whatever for the lowest plan, is by taking a percentage of every sale you make, in addition to the money they're already making off of Shop Pay, which is really just Stripe Connect, which is the same thing as WooCommerce payments. So, they're going to take that percentage that they get from Stripe for being a Stripe partner, and then they're going to take additional points on top of that off of every sale, just because you're using their platform. And then if you happen to use a different payment gateway, they take even more.
No way. Didn't even know that.
Yeah. Don't use any other payment gateway because you get a surcharge for that. So, and that surcharge is dependent on what plan you're on. So if you're on the lowest plan, you pay the highest surcharge. The more money you're giving them per month, the less surcharge you pay. And then, that goes all the way up to Shopify Plus, where for $2,000 a month minimum, you get the benefit of things like wholesale capability or other features that are behind that paywall that maybe aren't only needed for Shopify Plus customers. Wow. But in order to get them, you have to subscribe to Shopify Plus, which then leads to people who don't need all the features of Plus signing up for Plus, which underwrites the giant stores on Shopify Plus that don't pay as much as they probably should for the hosting they're getting.
So I'm literally like a store owner who would be looking at some of the expensive, perceivably at the time, expensive WooCommerce add-ons, thinking, whoa, $179 for that one specific plugin, etc. This whole build's going to cost me, I don't know, $1,000 in plugins. But in the grand scheme of things, that's $1,000 spent maybe once a year, potentially, if I'm doing renewals, versus $2,000. And I'm going to get wholesale in there somewhere. If I've got, it could even be less. I'm just saying, if I bought loads of WooCommerce add-ons, etc., you don't need that much for WooCommerce. You just need maybe 2 or 3 essentials. Right. But if I was spending that much, that's $1,000 a year versus $2,000 a month just to get wholesale, when there are many small companies who need that.
Well, and that one of the other paywalled features in Shopify Plus is the ability to build custom apps that aren't available to the public. So if you want to do custom development for your Shopify store, something that ties to maybe a legacy system that's proprietary to your company, you're going to need something that can make that connection, and that custom development is behind that Plus paywall as well.
And this is all stuff that I take for granted. With having WordPress and with WooCommerce, I know I can connect with a third party if I need to. I can integrate with a legacy system. I don't feel I'm held back. And usually there's actually a plugin out there as well, to be honest, where someone's already done the main hard work for me, and all I'm doing is activating it and maybe making a few changes, etc. So yeah. So on Shopify as well, and obviously we don't mean to slag them off, or maybe we do, but I mean, you've already painted a picture here of, oh my gosh, this could get ridiculously expensive very quickly, either because of my success or because I need something. Can every industry, though, even use Shopify?
No. There are industries that are precluded completely because of the fact that they will not allow what they call restricted products. And restricted products are things like CBD or, gun accessories, I guess, are one of those that are in the restricted products category. There are a whole ton of different things that you're not allowed to sell on Shopify. And those restricted products don't have another place. So, like alcoholic beverages are a restricted product because there are regulations and it's hard. There are certain cosmetics that they don't allow. There's certain dietary supplements or prescription medications. Obviously, drugs and drug paraphernalia. Those are restricted. Explosives. If you want to sell explosives, you're not going to be doing that on Shopify. And there are other things that just fall into there, jewelry and precious gems, depending on some of the things that you want to sell. If you want to sell loose stones that are cut, uncut, polished, or unpolished, those are prohibited.
Oh, wow.
So it really just depends. They're acceptable use categories, and it really depends on where you are as far as payments as well. So Shopify Payments has its own terms of service, and if you want to avoid those surcharges, again, you don't want to have to use another payment provider because you're going to pay through the nose. On the $29 plan, I believe it's an additional 2% per transaction. So that's 2% of your total income, basically. Or total revenue, I should say, because that's not even income at that point. So, because of that, there are things that aren't allowed through their payment processor. And so you would have to, in those cases, use a different payment processor and pay that surcharge. But even beyond that, there are restricted products you just can't sell at all.
I guess I understand it, especially with things like explosives, etc. Because, like you said right at the very beginning, it's not your site. If you are with Shopify, it's actually Shopify themselves and potentially their brand that could be damaged if they're allowing anyone and everyone to use their services. And would it get back that someone who did something bad bought something from a Shopify store that somebody started for $30? I imagine that would reflect really badly, therefore, on the Shopify brand. So you get it, and I get that, and that kind of leads me to the next question. I think that would be an advantage of WooCommerce over Shopify. That is one of the freedoms that you're able to do anything you want as long as you can set up your host, etc., and comply with your host's terms of service. Then you can set up your own shop selling whatever you want. What other advantages do you feel is there for owning your own platform, i.e., using WooCommerce over Shopify?
Well, there's definitely the advantage of the fact that you own your data, right?
Totally.
That's a huge thing. With Shopify, sure, there are ways to get your data. You can export your data. You can, use the API to pull data out of Shopify. But it's not easy, right? And with WooCommerce, you want a CSV of your data? Okay. Do you want the actual SQL dump from your database? Okay, you have access to that. So that's a big one. Owning your platform, owning your data. WooCommerce is free and open source. So, that's another big advantage is you own the ability to use the software in whatever way you want, on whatever host you want, in whatever environment you want, which is proven by the fact that I constantly get calls from people who are using underpowered hosting that are wondering why their cart suddenly stops working if they run an ad. So, but those are the big things, right? And there are other benefits, of course, to having the ability to do whatever you want with your platform. You can build literally anything. I've been very fortunate to build crazy things over the years. When I ran my former agency, I had a client that was a grocery chain that wanted Curbside pickup built for their grocery chain.
No way.
Okay.
Cool.
So we built it in WooCommerce and it worked. And we had market-based pricing and market-based inventory and all of the things tied to their point of sale software, which was internally built and proprietary. So we had all of these things just deeply embedded into their company, their systems, in a way that you can't do with a black box called software as a service.
Well, the other thing as well is there's the incredible documentation for WooCommerce and WordPress itself in enabling us to do exactly what you said. You know, that curbside pickup, all of those customizations, and then on top of that, what a freaking incredible community that we're all a part of. You and I already know each other because of the WordPress community. You know, there are so many people out there that use WooCommerce and WordPress all of the time. They've hit issues. They share that on their blogs. Hey, I hit this once. This is how I resolved it. Or if you post in a group, etc. Hey, folks, I'm struggling with XYZ. There are going to be people that just want to help because. Yeah. Weirdly, and I've never really met any other industry that's like this, we all just help each other instead of perceiving each other as competitors. Oh, I sell websites and you sell websites, so I'm not going to talk to you, which is kind of what maybe accountants are like. When I go networking, the accountants like sit on opposite sides of the room. We're all just like, hey, come here, mate, and I'll get you sorted out. This is what I did. Here's some code. Here's a code snippet, and we all just help each other out. So I think that's a beautiful part of our community.
Yeah, actually, the reason why my former agency started is because one of my co-founders was in a side room during WordCamp Chicago.
Whoa.
Dealing with the fact that his employer's site was down because they had run a flash sale.
Oh, no.
And, you know, I was one of the people that sat in that room brainstorming ideas with him, trying to help get the site back up. And that kind of stuff just doesn't happen anywhere else. We had people from multiple hosts at the table, right?
Wow.
All competitors. They all offered different services, and one of them was the company hosting the website.
Huh. Amazing.
One of the three.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you see things like that in the WordPress space that you just don't see other places. Yeah. And you know, it's partially a side effect of open source, but it's also partially just that the WordPress community is special, right? In a way that Drupal and Joomla just haven't been able to replicate, even though they've tried desperately to do so.
Yeah. I think they're just jealous.
I think so too.
Of course they are. They want what we've got, which is incredible. And some of my best friends as well on this planet now have been because of WordCamps or meetups, etc., or just Facebook groups as well. So the added benefit that you probably wouldn't get with Shopify. Well, I mean, so on that then, people. The problem is though, despite everything we've just said, WooCommerce is wonderful. Shopify is expensive and restrictive, and you don't really own it. You don't own your own data. They kind of can do anything they want, and you're kind of at the mercy of them, etc. People still are getting sick of their whatever problems they've got with WooCommerce, and they're just going, "Oh, sod this," and off they go, and they make that move. What, in your experience, are those biggest issues with WooCommerce and with WordPress in general that will push people to go to that extreme?
Well, part of it is we have this thing in the WordPress space called doing everything the WordPress way, right? And the WordPress way is let's shove everything into posts and post meta.
Yep.
And
oh man,
that's what WooCommerce did, you know, when it was forked from JigoShop, you know, and became WooCommerce. And it had that technical debt of it didn't use custom tables. It used custom post types, and it uses them brilliantly, right? There's more functionality around the custom posts for products and orders than I've seen in nearly any other post type on the planet. But That being said, they're still all shoved into the same two tables, posts
That's
and
one
post
very
meta.
big post meta table.
And yeah, that's a big problem, right? When you're dealing with something at scale. So normalized database structure has been the largest stumbling block for large scale WooCommerce growth or WooCommerce growth. I can talk, I promise. But that being said, those things are changing, right? That wasn't a priority for the WooCommerce core team for quite a while, and I understand why. You know, Paul Marana and I have had conversations on multiple occasions about why this is such a big issue for large stores. And he has rightfully so needed to put emphasis on the majority of their market until the portion that needed this functionality had grown to a point where it makes fiscal sense to assign resources. So my former agency had partnered with Liquid Web to release a custom order tables plugin in 2017. I spearheaded that effort. That was one of the first things that Chris Lemma and I had spoken about when he joined Liquid Web. And it was released as open source because Chris and I had spoken from the beginning about how important that was to me. That, you know, this be something that is available to anybody to try and use. So in 2017, the code base of WooCommerce changed, and that change allowed for the data types to have their data stores overridden. And that's what led to us being able to create a custom order tables plugin. And now WooCommerce has taken up that charge with what they're calling high performance order storage, or HPOS. And that change, while great, is really the same thing we did in 2017, just done slightly differently. And the reason it was so hard to get here is because in the WordPress space, plugin developers very frequently just tie things directly into posts and post meta because that's the WordPress way. So here we're back to the WordPress way, right? And when they created these abstractions, they created these classes that you're supposed to use and these methods you're supposed to use in order to get data from the core WooCommerce object types. And that's there so that people can get the data they need consistently, regardless of where it's stored. But for years, plugin developers since 2017 have not cared that existed because they were never really told, and in my opinion, in an effective way, that it was important to make that change. So high performance order storage is a step in the right direction. And the reason why it's a step in the right direction and not the solution is because the default when you turn on high performance order storage is to add a backwards compatibility layer. And that backwards compatibility layer keeps storing your orders in posts and post meta while simultaneously storing your orders in a custom table. So if the bottleneck that you're facing is the one that everybody I have ever worked with is facing, and the problem is that your orders are writing too slowly to your database because inserting an order also requires inserting 50 pieces of post meta, and post meta can't be added in bulk. So that's 50 separate database calls caused by 50 separate calls to add post meta. Then we really haven't solved anything yet, because that backwards compatibility layer, which allows plugins that still reach into post meta to be able to get data still, right? That backward compatibility layer is actually increasing the load on your database and not reducing it.
In my head, you would hook into get post meta and everything else for those particular post types, surely, and just remap, tell it where the data is. I'm not sure why they would be, i.e., just storing two sets of databases. I say that because what we do in our product and event engine, we don't use post meta, but we use custom tables, and we just hooked in so that if we install a plugin and it uses get post meta for any of the specific post types we've created, because we still use the post type code to create it, but then we store it in a custom table. We just tell it, hey, everything else is just in this flat table here. So whenever someone uses the underscore, sorry, not that underscore. Well, yeah. Even if they're using ACF or anything else like that in their theme or whatever, we will still be able to hook in and take them straight to the custom table. So that sounds like an interesting choice, I think, by WooCommerce. I was not aware of that.
It is an interesting choice, but it's been created out of necessity and technical debt, right? And that's the reality of a platform. And WooCommerce is arguably the largest WordPress plugin in existence at this point. And definitely the largest plugin ecosystem, as our friend Jonathan Wold would say, right? The largest ecosystem plugin that exists. And so with that being said, it's very hard to just make broad changes like that at this point. But now they're making the effort to show plugin developers where things are failing. And if you turn the compatibility layer off, which you can do, it's just a checkbox, then you will get access to the improved speed of inserts and everything provided by high performance order storage. The drawback to turning the backward compatibility off is it's a one-time choice. Once it's done, you're not going back. And as soon as you make that choice, all of the plugins that haven't updated yet aren't going to be available. So it is a very important choice to make very carefully and with that knowledge. And that's why I scream it from the rooftops every time I get a chance to do so. High performance order storage is amazing. It eliminates the largest bottleneck to high capacity sales on WooCommerce.
Well, from that, it makes me think of we have a TV series, which I think you guys have, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And when someone says, oh, I'll go for option A, and the host always goes, are you sure? Do you want to stay with A? And really starts to seed doubt. And I can just imagine the emotional decision pressure and stress and anxiety that I would have if I was going to check that box, knowing that this is it. This is the final moment. If I uncheck this, if I disable, then there is no going back. Well, actually, I have a backup, so I can always restore from yesterday. But I mean, obviously, a live site doesn't have that benefit, especially if transactions are happening all the time. Well, you wouldn't do that on a live site anyway. Before you've tested it.
No, you'd want to change it in staging first. Test everything, make sure that the site doesn't go down in flames because of a plugin that does not use the CRUD classes correctly for the data stores. So custom data stores, though, that functionality has been there for a long time now. It's been there since 2017, and it's nice to see them finally using it. But that's the biggest thing, right? Is scale. Scale. The cost of hosting is part of scale, right? Because Shopify, that cost is included. Optimization and performance, that's part of scale. So most of the people that I see contemplating leaving WooCommerce are doing so because they feel like they've outgrown it. Even though they haven't. They feel like they have. And then they get some salesperson from Shopify telling them, oh, you're on WooCommerce? Oh, you're doing that?
Sharp intake of breath.
We we can fix that. We know exactly how to fix that. Just sign your firstborn away. We'll give you everything you need. But that's the reality. I've dealt with a ton of customers who have gotten on a call with someone from Shopify who told them, oh yeah, WooCommerce can't scale. It can't scale. It's just a WordPress plugin. WordPress is for blogging.
I mean, that was true in 2007.
Right. And you know that these Shopify salespeople that are making these claims have no clue that, the White House website or time.com
Barack Obama used WordPress and won. Come on.
Any of these other large organizations are using WordPress, right?
Yeah.
And I believe the Times is using WordPress.
I believe so.
And just you think about that. These are giant publications that publish more things than humanity can read on a daily basis.
More so now that AI is on the way, writing even more content for them. So
yeah. And so you think about that and that scale. It's ridiculous to say that WooCommerce can't scale. It can. I've done it. I have had teams that have done it. The thing is, it's not easy to figure out how. And that's why when I first met Tom from Convesio and I saw the architecture and I was looking at everything that he was building, and it just all clicked. It was the way that we wanted to do things. It was the way that I wanted to build. And, with each piece being able to scale individually and all of the aspects of the site being able to scale separately. We have a lot of load happening on the database. Let's scale the whole server that everything's on. This is not the play. No. It's not the way that it should be architected, right?
Exactly.
You shouldn't throw bare metal at a stack that has everything in one place, right? Your database should be on a separate server than your web server. Your Redis server should be separate from your web server. Your web traffic should not be reliant on having enough free memory from your database inserts. It just the thing that got me into WooCommerce in the first place, and I will share this story as quickly as possible, is my friend Noah Courier calling me on Thanksgiving Day. I'm with family. And
must be a good friend.
We're eating, and he calls me and he says, "Hey, bud, I'm sorry to call you on Thanksgiving, but I need help." And I said, "Okay, what's going on?" He said, "Well, we had this interview with Jeff Joniak, the voice of the Chicago Bears, and it aired before the Thanksgiving Day game, and it was about our organization. And it was a Bears-Packers game, which, for American football, that rivalry is legendary. So lots of people in the Chicago market were watching, and the interview only aired in the Chicago market. But he said, we got a few orders, and then the site went down. And I said, oh, that's a problem. Do you know how to log into the server? Do you know where it's hosted? What do you know at this point in time that we can do to try and fix this? And 4 hours later, we had finally found all the information we needed to reset his VPS.
Oh, man.
Which was hosted by a company that had honestly done a good thing and donated the space to a nonprofit, and happened to be completely closed with zero emergency support on Thanksgiving Day.
Wow.
So we had nowhere to turn. And after 4 hours, the initial rush, of course, had passed. And what caused it all? What caused it all was that the organization's email was on the same server.
No.
And when the orders started coming in, the email spool filled and it ran the web server out of memory and crashed everything. So 14 emails were enough to, 14 orders worth of emails, which is like 3 times that, right?
Because you got 2 for the order and you got 1 that goes to the admin as well, haven't you?
Yeah. So I believe that's 42 emails, if my math is correct.
I have no idea. I'll just nod because I failed maths.
Yeah, something in there. But that was enough to take this tiny little VPS to the ground.
Bastard. I don't know if you saw me twitch earlier, by the way. I gave a massive twitch because it just reminded me of stories that I've had similar experiences myself. Carry on, buddy.
Yeah. And so that was what got me into WooCommerce. So it's no surprise that my entire time in the WooCommerce space, I've been focused on optimization and performance. And that during that time, I've been a major advocate for let your web server be a web server and don't make it do other things it shouldn't be. So that's where all that comes from.
That's an incredible story and incredibly emotional, I think, for many people. If you are watching, please let us know in the comments what are your horror stories that are similar, because that's a little bit of therapy I think we all need to go through at some point. We've all been in that position where your server is being hit. Your client screaming at you, I'm losing money, and you're like, and you're on trying to get someone from support and there's no one available, or you do manage and they just suggest you upgrade to the next package, like you said earlier, let's just throw more at it. So now we've doubled the RAM and doubled the CPU, which has bought us an hour before everything then crashes again. And oh man, what do I do? So I mean, we once had a server package where we went from I think it was £30 a month or something, and we had to upgrade to a dedicated server within 24 hours, which was £550 a month, and even then it was just everything all in one box, database, everything. So it was just a horrible experience.
And migrating e-commerce sites is not easy, right? This is not an easy thing. It's not something where you push a button and it's suddenly on another server and everything is good. Unless you've planned well ahead by setting up your DNS in a manner that allows you to switch what IP your domain points to very easily, or you are using a provider that has floating IPs and can actually change your IP with the move. Which is not most of them, by the way.
We were lucky in that regard.
Yeah.
So
yeah. If you're not in a position to do that easily, then that DNS update can take 24 hours, and that's a problem.
Yeah. What do you do? People hitting the old site. Do you have to disable purchases from that, surely? And then you've got the new one. And then what do you do about subscriptions on the old? So you've got cron jobs that you don't want running. And there's so many things. I have nightmares about it, mate. Seriously, this is therapy right now. Let's keep going.
It is. And on the subscription side, I mean, you can
carry on.
You may.
Thank you.
Let me just wrap you in this smooth jazz voice.
Thank you.
So we can disable subscription renewals for a day, right? Sure. We can tell it not to do that on the old production server, and we can let the renewals wait until the new production server is taking traffic, and that's fine. We can disable Action Scheduler. We can disable the old site completely. We can, put up a page that says we're moving and we'll be back shortly. And most DNS updates are going to take place if you're with a reputable DNS provider within 2 to 4 hours. But sometimes it's going to take longer, and it depends on where the customer is from, right? And what part of the world the customer is from compared to where your site is hosted. And all of these things factor in. So it's not easy to move. And that is the primary reason why people just stay and spend more money, because they can let the host deal with all of those things and all the complexity around it. And, because everything's in the posts table, again, we're back to that.
Yeah.
We can't just copy the orders out of an orders table and move them to another site, right? We can't do that because they're in posts. We can't just copy products and move them over to another site. So that's another reason why this abstraction is so important, and why I don't think they're going to stop with orders. I think products will probably be next. Products is harder. Products is harder because of variable products. But I think we will see that over time we'll move to a more normalized database structure. And, for those of you who are just here as store owners, a normalized database is just a database that is better organized, right? Where you create tables and establish relationships between things, and there are rules that protect your data, and normalization and a key value pair-based storage structure like posts and post meta aren't really things that mesh well. And while WordPress is really good at scaling posts in the publishing context, and a more normalized data structure is nearly required for more complex things like e-commerce. So yeah, moving toward that structure over time for all of the primary object types, the primary things we store in WooCommerce, like products, I think makes a lot of sense. And I think it will happen over time.
So I think right now we kind of started off talking about how expensive Shopify can be, and that definitely would have put people off. But now that we've had this conversation with regards to how big the database can get due to post meta, especially if you're on legacy, etc., and how complex hosting or how restrictive hosting can be, especially if you're in just a rinse and repeat. Yeah, we'll do you a quick VPS. Everything's all on one. That in itself is now also scary. And I'm thinking, oh man, I'm a store owner, or I'm supporting my client websites, etc. What would be some potential quick fix, might be the wrong word, but what would be some advice for people just to start to improve their experience with WooCommerce now, rather than them feeling they need to just jump ship because all of this is just too overwhelming?
Well, I'd say probably my first suggestion is stop getting plugins from disreputable places. And, you may think that now that you're a store owner in this wonderful open world of open source software, and, it's all covered by the GPL license, that everything is free forever and you should just be able to get whatever you want. And there's this cool club I saw advertised on my Instagram that told me all about how I can pay $29 a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, know that if you are trusting financial transactions for your customer with plugins you've received from a company that ripped off the plugin's creator, don't be surprised when they rip off your customers too. Just throwing that out there. And these plugin creators, they work hard to make this stuff. If you were to build all of it on your own, the average engineer, let's just say for the sake of argument, $50 an hour. You're spending $150 a year on a plugin that somebody put hundreds of hours of development into. You're paying for 3 developer hours a year.
And they're also going to keep it maintained. They're going to be keeping their eye on WooCommerce. They're going to be keeping their eye on WordPress and whatever's being depreciated, etc. They're going to make sure that their code is compatible for the next version and keeping it running. So, and for those people who don't do naughty things like visit XYZ Vault and GPL whatever. Okay, yeah, well, I've seen quite a few of them because I still get advertised them a lot.
Oh yeah,
For those who
me
aren't
too.
naughty, what other advice might you give people, especially if they've got a site that might be starting to feel a bit sluggish right now? Is there anything they can they defrag the hard drive, for example, back like we used to back in Windows 95 days?
I miss having that time as a break from normal things I
Yeah,
have to do, right?
watching the icon going across.
Now defragmenting happens every time you install an app on your Mac. It's just part of the install process. So it still happens. It just doesn't happen as visibly. So there are a couple of things you can do. One, take a look at the functionality you've added. What of that functionality is business critical? I'd argue that the most business critical thing is getting people through your sales funnel and through a checkout to a purchase as quickly and efficiently as possible, right? Everything else is icing on that cake. So if you want to speed up your store and you have 17 different plugins that are doing marketing related things, maybe pick 2. Disable everything else for a little bit and see if your business survives. Because if it does, all of that was unnecessary.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, you can always turn things back on one at a time until you figure out where the hole is. And when you find the hole and you've plugged it, turn everything else off and see what stays, right?
Yeah.
And so experimentation, it's a big thing. Is this mission critical? Does this serve the business's needs only? Or is it something I use to inflate my own ego?
I'm guilty of that one a lot.
Oh, I know that's a hard thing to hear as a store owner, right? Like,
I've done that a lot.
They
need to be able to do it like this. I must have them doing it like this when they don't really need to. It's me.
I got this new plugin that gives me my analytics in my WordPress dashboard okay, great. How many queries is it running on the front end? Is it running queries on the front end? Because if it is, well, you, my friend, might be the proud owner of a 300 query homepage.
Nice.
And so you just have to look at those things. And there are tools you can use to do some of this. This is a big part of what I do is I use application performance monitoring tools, things like New Relic, to go in and look and see what queries are slow, what plugins are causing those slow queries. And when I look at a specific page, what queries are the heaviest on that page. So your homepage matters, right? If you have a ton of JavaScript on your homepage that's doing things like carousels that are really just ego inflation for you and your marketing team because nobody pays attention past the first slide except for 9% of your audience. If you're doing these things, I'm not opinionated at all.
No, I agree with you, mate. So sliders are usually there for, I don't know how else to design this, so I'm just going to shove everything in a slider.
Exactly.
Which means you're missing the point.
Listen, I was guilty of using sliders because they looked cool until I met this guy, Pep Laya from Conversion XL, and he told me in no uncertain terms that sliders were fecal matter. He used a much, a much more direct term than that. But and he's very direct in the way he shares his feedback, and that's it's needed because there are always things that are slowing us down that we just don't need, right? So tons of JavaScript loading on the front end is probably slowing down your time to first byte. It's slowing down because if it's hosted elsewhere, it has to be retrieved. That's more DNS queries at the beginning of page load. And then it has to be downloaded before the page renders in some cases. So all of these things matter, right? It's not all just server performance. It's also in-browser performance. But if server performance is your problem, New Relic will show you, or tools like it will show you where those bottlenecks are and give you a really clear map for how to fix them. And, that's a lot of my time is just spent in New Relic looking at logs and data and seeing where things are going bad, where things are going wrong.
I mentioned earlier, didn't I, how easy it is in WordPress specifically to just go, oh, I need to achieve something, and you'll find a plugin that's already done it. Without checking on those plugins, very often they will just call everything they need everywhere in the admin head. So no matter what page you are in the admin, all of their stuff's loading too, when you really don't need it. You only needed it on their settings page. Or maybe they need to pull one thing through on the post edit, but instead they're just throwing it everywhere. So whilst it's an advantage to have this access to all of this amazing code, you're totally right. There are things that you probably don't realize it right now that are just adding extra weight that you really don't need.
Yeah. So my first tip for most store owners is make better decisions. That's it. Like, start making better decisions that are focused on optimizing your platform for performance and conversion, not on optimizing your platform for the C-suite, right? Now, that is a mistake that a lot of people make is, okay, well, we need all this data to just be here, right? And one of the pieces of data that needs to just be here, according to WooCommerce, is the number of orders you have that have not been touched yet. There's a little badge in front of orders in the admin. That's the heaviest query in the admin in all of WooCommerce.
No way.
You turn that off, WooCommerce-based backends suddenly start running faster. You can use the admin more efficiently because that query isn't running anymore. And that's a deep query.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
And you just turn it off and suddenly things are faster in your admin because, if you have a successful WooCommerce site and you have, 700, 800 pending orders, and it has to go through all of the database to find every order in a status that's considered pending.
That's nuts.
That query can get pretty heavy.
I've got one to throw in now because I want to sound clever. But if you disable that, if you go into WordPress settings and disable the avatars for getting them from Gravatar, we've noticed. I know it's nothing to do with WooCommerce right now, but it's just one simple thing that we just do as default now. We don't need the Gravatar avatars pictures. We don't need your pictures from your email generated at all.
Right.
And that adds a lot of weight. Just simple things like that as well, which are insane.
Yeah, it's always, it's always a series of tiny cuts that end up felling a tree, right? Yeah.
That was amazing.
And
I wish I'd said that. That was really good.
And what we're working toward is making a series of tiny cuts that remove the top of the tree that we don't need on every page load. And so that's what I do. I make a ton of tiny cuts and we continue making tiny cuts until we're happy. And once we're there, the store runs efficiently for the next X number of months or years, and then they come back when they have added bloat again and need my help to remove it, right? And I like that. Like that's what brings me joy, is tackling these difficult problems and figuring out where to make the right cuts so the tree doesn't fall on me.
So you are actually a tree surgeon.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah,
that's what I do.
That is a beautiful metaphor for what you do.
Thank you.
Well, you have made me very happy spending this time with me. and encouraged me to go and have a look at my own WordPress installations, because I'm pretty sure I've made a few bad decisions, specifically when it comes to my ego and presuming things, well, ego, or I have to have that data. And I'm just thinking, I've not even looked at that data. So why did I have that installed? So thank you so much. Mate, how can people connect with you? And then we will say adieu.
Well, I am my first initial and last name, Stepek, everywhere. If you want to look at my concert photography, because all of what I just said was boring to you, that's what my Instagram is. And everything else, my Twitter, my Facebook, is all basically around WooCommerce at this point. And you can find me at mightyswarm.com or zachstepek.com. There are links there if you are dealing with the things we're talking about where you can hire me. So just throwing that out there.
Folks, you can find everything in the description. As many links as we can find on Zach, we will share, as long as they're nice ones. So not, that thing that was in the news that time. I don't know. I hope there wasn't. I just made that up.
No, I think we're good.
Okay, cool. Zach, thanks so much for your time. You're a legend. Take care. Cheerio.
You too.